everybody. Welcome to episode 39 of the Kratom Sobriety Podcast. I'm Jacob, and I'm here with Charlie.
It's that time of year between Thanksgiving and Christmas. It's a little bit slow, but it's a little bit stressful.
Yeah, I hear that. Got some travel plans myself and getting everything finalized for that. So,
Yeah, today we have an interview. Decima talks with Chance, who is a barber. Appears that he dabbled a little bit of everything in the, powders, extracts, shots. Decima has his quitting story.
today I think I wanted to talk a bit about the expose that came out on December 27th in the Tampa Bay Times titled Deadly Dose. And it's just part one. There's more parts coming, I think 2 more parts. But part one is hundreds died using Kratom in Florida. It was touted as safe. And this was, again, published by the Tampa Bay Times. So really good article. Goes in quite a lot of directions, but kind of highlights some of the deaths from Kratom in Florida, as well as the rapid availability of Kratom in kava bars, Kratom bars, extracts, all of it. So, really good article if you haven't seen it. It's been circulating around and it's getting quite a bit of publicity.
It's a unique piece of journalism. It looks like the 4 reporters over 6 months did working full time, build a database of deaths in Florida. We've in past episodes referred to this study that McCurdy and some others did out of Florida that looked at just at 2 years of the deaths, and this went over like 10 years.
It's good because it's shining a spotlight on Kratom, probably in a large publication in a large major metro area in a well-read newspaper that is probably starting to get a lot of attention from people that might not have even known about Kratom or realized that this was becoming a problem in their community. So I think anything that continues to shine a light in that is good. Predictably, the pro Kratom community was up in arms against it, doing the usual whataboutisms, making logical fallacies about the deaths had to be from something else and how you can't just die from Kratom alone, all the typical stuff. What's really interesting is the American Kratom Association put out a response. I'm not sure exactly when, I think it was a couple days after the article came out, but they were basically doing their usual thing of saying that journalists were gaslit by the FDA, and they lay the deaths squarely at the feet of the FDA, which is interesting because obviously they want the FDA to regulate Kratom as a food and not as a drug, which I think we all know it is.
Couple standard response. One is it's just blanket, it's fake news, it's some kind of hit job, it's all biased. That's not even responding to the actual information and reporting, and it corresponds with some of the scientific articles too. People that will actually look at the information, they will go through this discounting of all the deaths. It is true 96% of the deaths either had people died with an opioid or they had an interaction potentially with like a over-the-counter medicine or a prescription med. The deaths that are associated with opioids, I think that shows sort of the limits of Kratom as a treatment for addiction or as a harm reducer. The deaths that are with an over-the-counter med or a prescription, those can be prevented somehow through better regulation. Yeah, hopefully in the end, this will dispel this belief that Kratom alone can't kill. That's only in one state, and there's potential for undercounting. Autopsies aren't universally done. Blood is not universally tested for toxicology. Right now, there's the part 1 was published. There's 2 companion articles. One where they tested 20 products, and then another article where they reported on how they actually conducted their analysis and investigation. And there's supposed to be 2 more parts in coming weeks.
I hope it's eye-opening for maybe some people that maybe have just started to dabble with the plant or maybe still are open-minded about it and can kind of look at things from both sides. I think if there were publications like this one I started with Kratom in 2019, because when I started, there were some parts of the internet where if you looked really deeply, you could uncover maybe that Kratom had an addiction potential, but they were few and far between. Whereas, fast forward 4 years later, 2023, there's a lot more information available, whether that's anecdotal or not, to show that this is a substance that can be addictive for some people. I also think the other parts that you alluded to, like the companions to this first article, the products was super interesting because there was some products in there that sound very concerning. We highlighted the one in the kratom in the headlines from last Sunday's episode was pretty fascinating because that's the number one product that was highlighted in there. We're not going to name it, but basically it's this super strong 7-OH extract that is really, really problematic. And I think that kind of just shows you some of the, I want to say, BS that is put out by some in the pro kratom community, because that stuff's pretty close to a legitimate opioid in my opinion. And I don't know any legitimate opioid you can buy over the counter really anywhere in the world. And I mean, this stuff you can buy anywhere. So I also saw some comments from the pro community too that were starting to like get behind the like extracts and stuff are going to ruin this for everybody, which I think is interesting because they also did some testing on some of the powder and found some pretty decent concentration of mitragynine and stuff in there. So all in all, a lot of various directions that it goes in.
Yeah, their testing showed another alkaloid that I'm not even going to try to pronounce on the air that was prevalent in a lot of the samples that I haven't seen a lot of discussion online or in the literature. And there was a couple other products, like a shot product that was 5 times more powerful than like of the popular shot. I mean, the only problem with the narrative that's extracts is clearly in their reporting, many of the people died from non-extract products and jives with the information we see. Kratom itself, powder, has some issues too. That's the only challenge with the extract discussion.
I don't buy into that discussion either, because like that would be like if you compare it to booze, right? Like Budweiser's not saying like, hey, we sell a low alcohol by volume product. The only thing that's going to give you cirrhosis of the liver is, Jack Daniel's 100 proof whiskey. I don't know if Jack Daniel's is 100 proof, but you see my point, right? You've got like these very concentrated alcohol products like vodka and stuff like that. Then you've got like beer and wine. Doesn't matter. You drink enough alcohol, you're going to have health problems. Like, it's scientifically proven. We all know that. I think we're starting to see with kratom, like, you go too far down with kratom, you're probably going to have problems. I don't know. I've never seen anybody that said that they can take, 100 grams of kratom a day, or 4 or 5 strong extracts that are equivalent of that, regardless of what they're doing, and like not be super dependent on it. It's science. You take enough of a drug that has something that binds to your opioid receptors, you're going to become dependent. You're going to suffer from withdrawal if you stop it abruptly. That's just the way it works.
We all know, we've known people that have gotten, primarily addicted to beer or wine or liquor, and sometimes there's progression between those three. Sometimes they're switching. The challenge here is, like in terms of regulatory, I mean, I think the situation is kind of an overcorrection for the marijuana and wars on drug. It's an overcorrection because there just is not a simple solution going forward.
Yeah, I think so too. I think the last thing I'll say is that when the war on drugs was at its height, people would make statements that were just blatantly false about substances. Like, for those of us that grew up in the '90s, I remember, when raves were happening and people were talking a lot about ecstasy and like it was laced with heroin, and then they actually did some studies on that and they never found any pills that were laced with heroin. So it's like the government and people were making up stories to kind of keep youth away from using substances. And now we have a substance that actually has some dangers, and I think a lot of people are like, yeah, but they lied about this and this. And I don't know, kratom seems pretty harmless to me. So, this all has to be made up, and it's just big pharma or the government trying to control us, which, I don't think is true.
And I both of us agree that nobody should be in jail or have an interaction with the cops because of drugs. This is a big business, and a big business should not probably be regulating itself. We don't let that with the airlines.
Charlie, I think you had some before we go into the interview. I think you had some comments that you wanted to cover.
First, Decima did a post on Facebook and asked listeners what they wanted to hear more about, and the two responses we got was, one, more interviews with powder users and more interviews with people on lower doses, like under 20 grams. I got an email from a listener who just wanted to ask for a correction. He gently told me, your theory about tapering and not that it's not a full-blown addiction if you're able to taper, that theory is a little bit harebrained. He expressed his experience both tapering off some harder stuff like heroin and methadone, as well as kratom. And even though he had the discipline to kind of meter down, didn't mean that the experiences weren't painful, the withdrawals weren't bad, and that he didn't have some pretty bad consequences from the addiction. So whenever you make blatant statements, you got to be careful. And this is a learning experience for me. And I actually am not a very experienced kratom user. I only used it for a couple of years, and my addiction only was 6 months. So
I quit a bunch of times, and I tapered once, and somehow I was able to do it. I relapsed pretty quickly after that, but after that I never could. So
yeah, we do have a taper interviewing, should be at the end of the month, and most of the people we've talked to have said they haven't been able to taper, and it was because there was a total loss of control. I admire people who have the self-control and to be disciplined to be able to actually taper, but it doesn't mean that it's not, if you're able to do that, that you're not having a bad addiction. And
on to the interview with Chance.
Hey, you guys. Tonight we're here with Chance. We're going to talk with Chance about his recovery and his path, his struggles with Kratom along that path. How are you doing tonight, Chance?
I am doing great. I am blessed. Just been a full day's work and I'm feeling satisfied tonight.
Nice. We really appreciate you making time to chat with us tonight. So for somebody that's just meeting you, tell us a little bit about Chance.
Well, let me just go ahead and start by saying it is an absolute privilege to get to share this part of my story. I'm just a regular guy that, I've always wanted to do something great in my life. And I just didn't know what that was going to be. So, I tried real hard at every avenue I could possibly think of and had lots of failures, but along the way, I've also had a lot of successful things happen. And a lot of it has to do with finally finding a path in recovery and using that to my advantage to grow further as a person and a man, and finally get to become the husband that I've always wanted to be as well and find a career.
Those are all very noble goals. How long did you use Kratom? I personally would like to know if you were using it daily. Did you ever take breaks? Some people call it tolerance breaks. What was your use like and how long did you use?
That's a really good question, and it's going to have a good broad answer. I used it for a little over 2 years consistently. That's not the case the whole way. I've tried it in the past before, and I would get some feelings from it, but it's never something I've really stuck with. There are some other dependency issues prior to kratom use, but I'll save that for later on tonight. But yeah, I started using it, and it wasn't a consistent thing at first. I'm the kind of guy that likes to test things out, and see if it'll work for me because I'm so unique,
Right.
and kind of special in that way. But yeah, I just started, trying it here and there. I have chronic back pain, and I was trying to find something to help me with that. I found something that would, or people told me it would help, and I learned about it, but it wasn't something I considered dangerous at all. After all, it is natural, as people talk about.
Of
So,
course.
yeah, it started out very innocently, and it wound up bringing me to my knees in a matter of 2 years' time of consistent use.
I'm sorry to hear that. I definitely can relate, as a lot of us can. It's quite an insidious monster, that kratom. So as of tonight, how long have you been kratom free?
I haven't done the math on that, but my last dose of kratom was March 16th of 2023, so earlier this year. So my first day free was March 17th.
Nice. I am not far behind you. My last dose of kratom was the last day of May. So we are close there. Just made
Congratulations.
thank you, and congratulations to you as well. It's amazing,
Thank you.
isn't it?
It is.
Okay, so, and I also, just a side note, was wondering, like when you were taking kratom, how were you taking it? Was it like powder or extracts? How were you consuming it?
Well, I took it all, but it didn't start out like that. It started out with just taking a little bit of powder here and there. And honestly, I didn't really get much of an effect off of it when I did take it. I would try microdosing it, just throwing in a little bit of water, and I never really felt an effect from it until there was a time whenever I had tried an extract, and I just took a sip off the bottle, and that was really all it took to actually make me dizzy, wobbly, sick. And that's whenever I noticed an effect, was after that point. So it's kind of funny you said insidious, and that's a great term for it, because I am the type of person that once I feel a certain euphoria, I begin to chase it, and I begin to obsess on it. And I didn't realize it, but at that time, I had found something that I wanted more of. But I tried to hide it and cover it up and pretend that it was okay because I didn't crave it yet. So that's where I started. And then I did end up using a lot of the powder as well. So kratom capsules, powder, and extracts.
Yeah, insidious to me, the way it worked was it was so insidious in the way that, like you said, you just don't even realize that it's hurting you at first for me, until I actually went without it and realized I was sick without it. So that was super sneaky of kratom to do that to me. So
Absolutely.
totally there. So I'm also wondering, how did you learn about kratom? I know you mentioned that you had some chronic pain. Is that what led you to, find kratom, or how did you learn about kratom?
I love that question. Yeah, it's really interesting because I knew about it a long time ago. So I knew it existed, and I tried it a long time ago, but I was drinking heavily back then when I took it, and I got an effect from it then, and I got real sick, but it really didn't. I really didn't carry that through, or seek it out anymore. It wasn't until I started experiencing more back pain. There's in this town that I'm in, we are completely saturated with kratom stores. They're everywhere. It's about like on every corner. Um, my wife and I went to Tennessee on our honeymoon, and I noticed while we were there, I was looking for the CBD stores, and I was already working a kratom and CBD superstore at that time. So I had been introduced to it, had lots of customers coming in and buying it left and right, and I never really understood it. And they would tell me all the different effects, the different, the strains like red, whites, yellows, all this kind of stuff. And it didn't make a lot of sense to me. While we were there, she deals with chronic pain herself, and she purchased some, and, she would take it, but I don't think she ever really got too much of an effect off of it either. However, it did pique my interest a little bit more. And so whenever I came back to town, we sold the kratom powder and extracts at the store I was working at. And I just started talking to the people that was coming in to buy it a lot and find out how they took it, why they took it. And I decided that this might be something that works for me. So that's when I began taking it myself.
So this will be interesting for me to hear your answer on this. This could be the difference possibly between you and your wife. I know it is for me and my husband. But had you had a past history of drug abuse or drug addiction, substance issues of any kind like that before?
I'm so glad you brought it up. Yes. So by the time I began experimenting with Kratom, I had experienced a life of complete abstinence from drugs and alcohol for a little over 6 years before I had started messing with Kratom. And, it kind of roped me in because, I had so I'm also a member of a 12-step program as well. And at the time, my sponsor that I talked to about it, he didn't know anything about it. I didn't know much about it. So it was kind of like a green light because I was selling it at the store and it was all natural. So it was like, well, if it doesn't mess you up that bad, it can't be all that bad, kind of a situation. So I'm glad you asked that. She doesn't have a dependency issues like I do. So she's kind of the person that can take a drink here and there, and it doesn't really seem to have an effect on her. If I do that or any other substances, I'm pretty much going to put that above everything else in life.
Why do we addicts always find somebody to partner up with that's just the opposite? Because it seems like it's a common theme for us that we do that. So
it's that, and we seem to find the best people in the world that can deal with us.
deal with it.
They're so gracious and kind.
So back on track a little bit with Kratom. What for you were early signs that, hey, this is a problem? This is not such a good thing for me to be doing. What were those early signs?
Well, you mentioned how I'm in the barbering industry, and I was going up to the store either the night before or early in the morning before I had to go to work. And I was buying, just a little small extract shot, and I would dump it in a full bottle of water. So it diluted a little bit, and I would sip on it throughout the morning, and it would just give me just kind of a warm euphoria feeling like I could talk to anybody. I didn't feel my back pain. So it just really opened me up and kind of made me a social butterfly, if you will. And, that worked wonders with my clients. I had, it gave me almost like a little bit of a coffee buzz, but didn't make me all jittery and shaky. So that's where it started there. It progressed on for a few weeks after that. And what I noticed I was having so much trouble with it was I was at work one day and I had drank my entire bottle of water before 10 o'clock in the morning and I felt nothing. And for me to consume that, knowing it's worked in the past and it didn't work that day, well, something was wrong with the stuff I was getting. So I drove all the way across town, chewed out the guy at the store that was selling it to me, let him know it wasn't any good, you know. And then you mentioned yourself that having to come off of it. I think it was a Friday night, and I had come home and I had had about 3 bottles of it total that day, and so I had noticed I spent a little over $30 to fill that way all day. And I decided I wasn't going to take any more that night. And that was the first time I experienced withdrawals. And I had to drive across town to pick up my wife that evening. It's also the same night that I admitted to her that, honey, I think I might have a problem with this stuff.
Which is one of the best things you could do. So I applaud you for that, for real, because it's a humbling moment and it's a scary moment when we realize what we've gotten ourselves into and that it was this, like you said, innocent plant, that did it. So
Yeah,
thank you for sharing that.
you're welcome.
Did you, and I'm sorry, this is off script a little bit, but did you have any negative side effects from Kratom? Any health issues or anything like that?
The major negative side effects I had from it were, what they call the wobbles, the real dizzy stuff. And there were several times to where I would consume my kratom either shot or powder form, and I would get so sick that I'd throw up. But that to me just meant push through that because there's euphoria on the other side. That's how I think about things. But as far as like any the negative effects didn't come until later, and it involved chronic illness, almost like the flu. massive weight loss that a lot of people thought that I had a serious disease, and tons of mental side effects like depression, anxiety, and stuff like that. But that did come a little bit later after I first recognized a problem because I kept going.
Well, you did mention, that you had a moment where you came basically clean with your partner. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about that moment just because I think it's important. And a lot of us struggle with, we quit and we relapse. And it seems like we all have that moment where we just know. And I'm wondering for you, what was that moment that led to you just knew it was time to quit?
Well, you mentioned that moment that I had that evening, and I'll tell you this real quick before I get onto that, was that I knew I needed to quit that night. And I did, and I went through about a couple weeks of some flu-like symptoms, but within about 3 weeks' time, I'd already started up again. So it came back to me, which was really interesting. And then after that, it grew and it developed. It developed into more of a chronic use of multiple doses all throughout the day, both powders and extracts. And the moment when I knew that I was absolutely finally had to be done with it, and I was scared out of my mind to make a stop because I had tried 2 or 3 times before. I tried tapering, and nothing seemed to work because I kept craving it, and I kept obsessing about it. And the most horrible thought in the world to me was having to stop it, and what my body was going to do, and what my mind was going to do, and how am I going to keep up living like this? Am I going to be able to live like this? Those were the thoughts that came through my head. Uh, but if you're asking me what my bottom was, what finally brought me to the point where I knew I had to make a change, it was much after those instances I was telling you about, because I carried on like that for quite some time. So I had to take my wife in to an appointment she had. She had a major surgery, which I had used all the way through that, and she had to go in for this manipulation, is what it was called. And I know that day alone, I had to take a bunch before I took her in. While I was sitting there waiting for the doctor, I was out of my mind, and I wasn't thinking right. So I was being a total jerk to everybody around, including her, aggravated, restless, discontent, just angry at everybody. And I had to leave her in the room itself, once or twice just to go home and redose. And I found it easy to leave her there while the procedure was done, just so I could go home and sit there with my extracts and take them because I couldn't do it without it. Now, at one point, her doctor called me, which I should have been there waiting for her, but he called me and said, "You can come and get her now." And it's kind of foggy, but I do remember going up to the hospital to pick her up. I was driving erratically. I was driving very insane. I was yelling at her, yelling at other drivers. I was not a very kind person to be around whatsoever. And by the time we got back home, I was really noticing what I was doing, but I couldn't do anything about it. I was reacting, and I was reacting out of instinct and craving, and I just couldn't stop it. And I knew then that it had to stop. That's when I made my decision, but I wasn't able to stop yet. That was just when I knew I had to.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that with us. That's, something I think a lot of us can relate to is, doing things that we wouldn't normally do, not only for Kratom, but for whatever our drug of choice is. And that can be a sobering moment. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'd like to move towards sobriety now and talk about how you actually accomplished this. I know you mentioned your wife, but it sounds like she's been very supportive, and I'm going to circle back around to that. But first, I'd like to know the technicalities. Did you taper? Did you go cold turkey? Did you use medications, supplements? Tell us how you did it.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and say that before I was actually able to stop, I did visit a treatment center type place to get some help. And I'm just going to go ahead and let you know that it didn't work for me because they had asked me to stop cold turkey, and I couldn't do that. I lied to them and let them know that I did so I could go ahead and get treatment. But the treatment they were going to offer me was going to be a much stronger addictive substance that I'd have to go on to. And I found trouble with possibly getting off that later. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to talk about that one right now. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward to the time whenever I had to stop. And, since I know this is a Kratom sobriety room that we're in, but I'm just going to go ahead and tell you that I was taking it and going into a 12-step program meeting that I go to that helps me with my recovery. And I was going in and I had to be open and honest with people. And it was really hard. I had to start my program over. So I was surrounded by love and support, but I just had to let them know where I was. And fortunately for me, and I think this is a divine thing, I was surrounded by a couple guys that they were like, yeah, I've been there. I know what that's like. But they were like, dude, you're never going to be able to just taper off this stuff. You're the way our mind is. And this is just me speaking personally. So if there's anybody listening to this that's doing that, I'm not against that. I am saying that for me, he gave me the courage that day. He said, he's like, man, you just need to and I took a dose before the meeting, so he knew I was taking it then. He's like, you just need to go home, lock yourself up, and go to your bedroom. He says, dump your shit out and just go through it. And I had tried that so many times, but I just wasn't strong enough yet. I hadn't had enough pain, I think it was. And finally, I was just like, you know what? I'm going to go do this. And so I didn't have any special supplements of any kind. I just knew that I was going to go home and do this. I have vitamin C capsules I take anyway and multivitamins. So I came home, I locked the door, extremely paranoid, extremely anxious, depressed, and rather suicidal, I might add. And I laid in the bed and I just waited for the clock to turn and went through. The withdrawals wouldn't start hitting me until probably about 4 or 5 o'clock that evening because I'd taken my dose at about 9 a.m. So it started creeping up and I just went through it, and it was really hard, but I made a decision at that time to stop. And I'm just going to go ahead and say too that for me at that moment, prayer helped me. I stayed in prayer and asked for strength to make it through.
So that actually was my next question. If there were certain things that did help you through the withdrawal process, and what was that first 30 days sober and without Kratom like?
Um, well, make no mistake, it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I've came off of alcohol, back in 2015, I came off of that. But it was very similar, except for I couldn't believe how cold I was. It's just like the cold chills that were affecting me were out of this world. I felt like I was frozen all the time. And, I was sweating all at the same time. So I was completely frozen and dripping with sweat and had covers all over me and sweats and a heater on me all the time. I had dealt with tremendous amounts of anxiety. There were a couple times I had to get out in public, and it was, the only reason why I did it's because my wife wanted to go someplace and I didn't want to be that guy saying, oh, I can't do that. But I went with her a couple times and froze to death in front of people that weren't freezing to death. I had tremors and shakes a lot, and it was really hard for me to get rest. That was very difficult for me. So my mind was racing constantly. Lots of physical withdrawal symptoms, but it wasn't something that was completely unmanageable. I knew that it wasn't life threatening. It feels like it, but I did enough research to know that just me coming off of it alone wouldn't actually kill me. So I just kind of embraced the suck, and I said, okay, this is it. I'm going to feel this last time and get through it.
A lot of people find that to be a very effective method. I know I did too, because you don't want to go through it again after you go through it. So I totally get that. So one of the questions that I see asked the most is, and I am going to quote, unquote, air quote this, how long did it take you to feel normal again? And that's the quote unquote part, normal.
Yeah. Well, that is a good question. And, I see this a lot in the group too. And, for me, and I do believe it's a very individual basis thing, our bodies are all biologically different. So it took me, I would say, probably about okay. So the first 3 to 4 days were the worst. That it was awful. Um, about 3 weeks of constant chills and lethargy and, inability to not rest very well, things like that. And then once all that passed, it really wasn't too terribly bad. I had a lot of racing mind. I still had a lot of anxiety and depression. But I think the thing that got to me the most is I like to eat, and, that stuff, it sucked the life out of me. I was skin and bones, and I started wanting to eat again, which was amazing. But, I could have sworn that I had, what is that called? It's just, I can't remember the name of it because I'm on the spot, but it makes it to where you can't eat a lot of certain foods. And so I would eat, like, say, I ate a lot of bland foods for a long time, and then I'd get the courage to go, like, say, to Arby's and get a sandwich or someplace like that. And it would just be delicious because I was finally tasting things again. And I would eat the sandwich, and then I'd be up all night in the bathroom, it was uncontrollable stomach, gastric issues. That's where I'm going with that. But I thought that I had developed some sort of, I don't want to say an allergy, but do you know what that's called, hon? What? Never mind. She's doing her homework. But, I thought that I developed some sort of problem with my, stomach and my digestion the whole time. But what really took place was my body was recovering, and it took probably about 3 months of me, taking care of myself like that in order for me to eat normally again.
Yet another very common recurring theme we seem to hear is the stomach issues. So there has to be something to that. Who knows what Kratom is doing to our insides. I'd like to circle back to you mentioned your wife, and it sounds like you're very blessed to have a supportive wife and partner. And I'm wondering if you have other support in your life. Are you open about this with people in your life? How does that look?
Yeah, that's another good question. And I am, because I was affecting everyone around me, Um, I was just talking to her about this interview that we're doing, and I was talking to her about being at work today and all that, and I was wondering, if anybody there would find out, a little paranoia. And she says, "Well, your boss already knows, because during that time, I completely walked out of my job one day under the influence of the stuff. I just left, and I left a good opportunity on the table." As far as support, I have tons of support from my boss. I have support from all my friends in the fellowship, my family. I came clean to them about it because they kind of had an idea that something was wrong anyway, because I wasn't trying to lose weight, and I went from looking fairly good like I do now to rail thin, my cheekbones sticking out, all my ribs showing, completely weak, and, an asshole most of the time. So, I have a lot of my friends and family back in my life. And a lot of that's due to me being community, being a part of the fellowship. It helps, to stay accountable. And, I have, people I talk to on a daily basis that, are in 12-step programs. And so they know what it's like to live this life. And, yes, we do keep each other accountable. Am I able to have friends outside of that? Absolutely. But, I'm 45 years old. I'm tired, and when I get done from work and I'm done with my meeting for the day, I like to come home and rest.
Completely get that.
Tons of support, though. I'm
Right.
grateful for that.
So outside of all of this amazing support that I'm so happy to hear that you have, what else does life look like for you now that you're on the other side and kratom free?
It's absolutely beautiful. And one thing when we're dealing with beauty is we have to remember that even nasty can be beautiful. Even the nasty times, the hard times, the challenging times, that can all be beautiful as well. Um, there's nothing I like better than a nice sunshiny day, 65 and up, maybe not up there 110 or anything, but I love weather. And I know for the longest time when I was taking taking the kratom, it was, anytime it would have any clouds in the sky or it would be gray or rainy outside, I was just so depressed and could hardly do anything. Couldn't get out of bed, couldn't leave the house. So there's beauty everywhere. In my job, I have flourished. I've went from being a part-time instructor to now I'm back to it full time, and it's amazing. And just I don't know, it's been since March that I've been off the stuff, but like even today, my boss had come up to me and I was quite surprised about this, and they was just asking me if I could lead an educators meeting today. So I'm in an office with teachers all around me, and it was such a great opportunity, and it was a privilege to be able to talk about next week's educational agenda. And I'm doing all this stuff, and the whole time I'm just like, thank God that I am not having to slip off in the bathroom to take an extract shot right now, or waiting till this is over so I get out to my car and pop open one of my bottles of powder mixture that I make up. It's a life without that stuff, and it's beautiful. And one of the biggest changes I've noticed though is not everything that I've just mentioned, but we also have the ability to respond to life now instead of react. And I was a big reactor. I was like a ticking time bomb. And now I can actually absorb life. And not all the time. I have my moments still. I'm still a human being, but I have times where I face difficult circumstances and I'm able to breathe. I'm able to pause. I'm able to go off and think about what I'm going to do. And then I can respond. And that's such a huge gift. So when I say life is beautiful, it's still hard, but I'm able to get through it without reacting and overreacting now.
I just love that. I think there's just something about recovery people. We just see everything in a way. It's like a second chance at life. So recovery people are my people. So I'm just so happy to hear that everything's going so well for you. I do want to talk a little bit. Charlie mentioned that you're a barber, and you mentioned it earlier. And how do you use your recovery in your daily life, or does it help you to be a more supportive person to others?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because sometimes, like when I said a while ago, I talked about reacting and responding. I'm constantly faced with, situations to where I'm interacting with others who also face their own demons. They come in with, dependency issues. They come in with, social issues. Maybe they're having a problem at home, whatever it is. It's like, it's easy for me to get on their level and understand a little bit more where they're coming from. Um, I have a few people that I'm teaching right now that, because I have this experience and they know a little bit about my past, and I'm share it. If I see an opportunity, they let me know they're struggling with something, or I was teaching somebody the other day, and we was having a Christmas party, and the guy, he had a little problem going on, I could tell. And he didn't tell me about it, but I let him know. I was like, hey man, uh, I smell that kind of thing. And not that there's anything wrong with that one. But I don't personally take that one either. But, he just said, "Hey man, I'm looking to actually become toxin free. Do you have any ideas or any places I could start?" And, it's interesting because, with me living this lifestyle now, it's not like I'm out there trying to sell it to anybody. I let people do their own thing, but, it's kind of like in the program we talk about attraction. So it's like I am an example now of what it's like to live in recovery and live in a solution rather than a problem. And I think that presents itself to others and they can see that. So in short, I am presented with situations quite frequently to where I'm able to, help people without, having to chase them down. They kind of come to me and they're attracted to what I have to offer.
I like that you used the word attracted because what came to mind for me was that when we were using, or at least for me, I was so wrapped up in myself that I didn't really realize that everybody around me is hurting and struggling too. And now, I mean, my life's not perfect, but I'm healing, and in that healing, I'm more open and receptive to seeing that others exist too, and that they
Yes.
matter. So, I was pretty selfish as an addict. I don't know why.
Oh yeah. I know a
But
thing or two about that.
so let's talk about. I want to go ahead and knock this question out because it's one that we love to talk about here on the podcast. Everybody seems to enjoy music again, much more whenever they get sober. So, what kind of music are you into?
I like that question because I like good music. Okay. And there's, for me, there's good music and then there's bad music. And, if it's something I can vibe with, I like it. So it's hard for me to say a specific genre because I like it all. But if I hear something bad, I'll tell you about it. I'll be the first one to say, I think that sucks. It's no good.
So, I'll nail you down on this one. What is the last concert you went to?
Last concert I went to. The last concert I went to is probably some sort of a rock show. So we seen Wage War was the last rock concert we went to. So they're a heavy metal band.
Okay.
New age heavy metal band. Before that, it was Breaking Benjamin.
Oh, nice.
And several others prior to that. There's a lot of really good stuff out there, but I was kind of born and raised on rock and roll. So if you were to ask me what my favorite music was when I was in high school up into my 20s, I would be saying 9 Inch Nails all the way, baby. Love Trent
Love it.
Reznor, all that stuff, and I like all kinds of heavy metal music, but I've also gotten into some of the hip hop that's out now. I don't okay, so example of bad music to me, this new country stuff that's hip hoppy, but twangy, I just can't get down with it. But, I've got a couple new students that are like really into Morgan Wallen and stuff like that. And if you listen to some of his lyrics, it sounds like he struggles too with some stuff. So I'm like, hey, how does he make it?
As long as you promise to leave Bailey Zimmerman out of it, because I have a little crush on Bailey.
Can't
But
stand Bailey Zimmerman. No, I don't know who that is.
Look, it's the new wave country, okay?
Okay. Is it that rap country they talk about?
No, he doesn't rap. He's actually a pretty talented kid. You should check him out.
What's his name now?
It's Bailey Zimmerman.
Bailey Zimmerman. Okay. I'll try to remember that.
Yep, check it out. Okay, so moving on, if you were to give some advice to somebody that's trying, to quit and just starting out on their path and their journey to healing, what advice would you give them?
The advice I would give to somebody if they were wanting to quit would be to make a decision. Is it really, do you want to quit, and are you willing to go through some tough times in order to achieve that? And if you're willing to go through some tough times to achieve that, then there is a way out, you know. But if it's still one of those things where because we all still get pleasure out of it, but it kind of comes to a point to where am I getting more pleasure or more harm from it? And so if it's doing nothing but destroy your life, and you can clearly see that, and I'll tell you too that so I work the 12 steps, and in step 2, it mentions insanity. So if you're insane for some reason, then you may not be able to reason that out yourself. And that's why I'm saying you might want to check yourself a little bit and see if you're willing to go through some hurt in order to achieve yourself. And then if that's the case, I would say just get honest with yourself and make a change.
That's a really great advice, Chance. And I just want to thank you again for coming on the podcast. Is there anything that I forgot to bring up, or any message that you want to leave the listeners with tonight?
Yeah, I do. So I was joined the group a long time ago, back whenever I started noticing myself struggle with it. And I saw a lot of posts asking about how hard it is. And, there's a lot of times when we want to really take things and become afraid of them because they're hard. So if there's anything I can say, it would be that if you have a question of, can I ever get off of Kratom, or am I stuck here? The answer is absolutely you can get off of it. And no, you're not stuck there, because there's folks like you, there's folks like me in this group, and there's several others. And we have some experience, some strength, and hope for you if you're ready for it. And just get ready. If you're ready to stop, embrace the suck, embrace the pain, embrace the withdrawals for what they are. And that's that nasty shit leaving your body and getting ready for a whole new life for you.
It really does get better, even when it doesn't feel like it's going to, because I know we all had those moments where we wondered if it ever would be better. And we are all here to tell you that it absolutely does get better, and it is so worth it. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, Chance. We really enjoyed having you on the podcast.
You're welcome. And again, it was a privilege and an honor to be here. And thank you so much for asking me.
Absolutely. I hope you have a great night.
You too.
Kratom in the headlines, the last one for 2023. We have a clip of the Tampa Bay Times from their TikTok account about their series Deadly Dose. Please go to their website and read the articles themselves. Part 1 and 2 are both available now, along with the 2 companion pieces. Part 3 should be out this last week before Christmas. Take a listen, please.
This herbal product is everywhere. The Tampa Bay Times found its use can lead to devastating consequences.
We didn't know what we were dealing with. And I think he knew that it wasn't a good idea, but I don't think he was trying to put his life at risk.
Jonathan Dampf took a lethal dose of Kratom. More than 580 people in Florida have died from Kratom-related overdoses during the past decade. Most of the deaths were caused by a mixture of substances, but 46 people overdosed on the plant alone, according to medical examiner records. Many consumers laud the herb as an effective way to treat pain, depression, and addiction. Industry leaders have said you can't die from the substance, and the lack of regulations has allowed companies to sell increasingly potent products. The American Kratom Association called the Florida death toll grossly overstated.
Because it's detected does not mean that it is the cause of or the contributing factor in the death. The FDA has promoted, and with their propaganda, anti-Kratom propaganda, that Kratom is a dangerous substance and therefore causing these deaths.
We gathered records from medical examiners across Florida and built the most comprehensive database of Kratom-related overdoses by any news organization. Here's what we know. Not all Kratom products are the same. In Southeast Asia, fresh leaves are chewed or used to make tea. But in the US, Kratom is commonly sold as dried powder or in highly concentrated forms like liquid shots. Companies brag about the strength of their Kratom, marketing powders and shots as powerful, most potent, and long-lasting.
We don't know what the toxic windows are, and it frightens me from that standpoint.
Kratom companies and lobbyists tout the plant as a safe way to escape opioid addiction. But vendors aren't required to warn customers of the potential dangers of mixing the plant with other substances, including common ones like anti-anxiety medications. Scientists believe Kratom has therapeutic potential and are racing to better understand the plant. But much remains unknown about how to safely consume it and whether taking it could lead to long-term effects. It started gaining popularity in the US in the 2000s and has since grown to a $1.5 billion industry nationally. The lack of regulations leaves consumers in a dangerous vacuum of information.
Nobody knew what to be concerned, to be scared, to be like, are we overreacting? Are we underreacting? We didn't know.
Follow for part 2 of our investigation that looks at how lawmakers around the country are passing industry-friendly bills championed by lobbyists.
And on a slightly more festive note, this is your last chance to call in for the holiday special. We have a Google number that will be in the show notes. We are taking 3-minute messages about your Festivus grievances and your Festivus miracles. We will play them on the air on December 24th, 2023. Thank you.
Jingle bells, Decima is here to tell you the resource of the week. Yuletime greetings, Quitting Gang. I hope everyone is surviving the hustle and bustle of the quickly approaching holiday and making it through the season with little to no stress and all the joy and peace you deserve. For many, this time of year is mostly all about celebration. But for a lot of addicts, the holidays can be tricky to navigate, and we often find ourselves needing a little extra support. Not to mention the colder weather and viruses the winter often brings can sometimes make it more difficult to get out and about. So today's resource of the week is all about virtual support meetings. As always, the following resources will be linked in the podcast descriptions, but we just wanted to make sure that our listeners are all aware of this incredible resource. I know that for me personally, these meetings they've been a supremely valuable tool in my arsenal against this Kratom beast. I've made some really wonderful connections with others out there who are also struggling with this unique and insidious vice that not everybody understands, you know? So that being said, I bring to you the following meetings. These are all virtual online Kratom addiction meetings. And the first one that I want to talk about is called Quitting Kratom. It's on Saturday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern. This is a Zoom meeting, so you will need the Zoom app or log into zoom.com. The next meeting is also a Saturday meeting. This is a fairly new meeting, but it is a Kratom Anonymous Kratom 12-step group. This meeting again is also on Saturdays at 5 p.m. Eastern, and it is also on Zoom. Next, we have Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern. Let's Talk Kratom. This meeting is hosted by Treatment Center Kratom Support Group. To register or to attend this meeting, you'll need to go to their website, which we, again, will have linked below. But that's going to be mountainside.com/support-groups/Kratom. Again, that's Let's Talk Kratom. The next group I want to talk about is brought to you by yours truly. This meeting is affiliated with our online Facebook group. It's called Quitting Kratom Support. This meeting is on Wednesday nights. It's p.m. Eastern. This one is on Google Meet. You can download the Google Meet app, or you can go to the Google Meets website to attend this meeting on Wednesday nights. And the next meeting we're going to talk about is Quitting Feel Free. This one was originally started to talk about the unique struggle that people found themselves in when they tried to quit the Feel Free products. However, anybody is welcome to attend this meeting. It's also on Wednesday nights at 30 p.m. Eastern. This one is back again on Zoom. The last meeting I have for you is hosted by Dopey, which is also, if you're familiar with the Dopey podcast, this one is on Thursday nights. It's at 7 p.m. Eastern. Once again, this one is on Zoom. I just want to make a note that these meetings are hosted by volunteers. Sometimes they are canceled unexpectedly. I will say that we do our very best to keep you informed. If the meeting has to be canceled or moved around, most of us have either a WhatsApp chat, a Facebook Messenger chat, email, notification list, something of that sort in order to keep you guys posted on what's going on with these meetings. So again, check the list of resources below for the online virtual meetings. And in the meantime, keep it kratom free and have the happiest of all the holidays, quitters.